Okay, so let's start with the session. And if anyone is spamming over here, I guess I have to remove that person. So please do not spam. If I see any more message over here that might go spam or unrelated to the topic, obviously I have to remove. Okay, so let us start with the session. Today's session is basically based upon how Linux was created and what is basically Linux. ठीक है, हम लोग Linux के ऊपर session कर रहे हैं. This Linux particular operating system is very much important for our ethical hacking and cybersecurity career, right? In case you want to go ahead and you want to learn cybersecurity, Linux is one of the prominent things you have to learn and you have to work upon. So Linux is something that we really need to understand how Linux basically works and how we understand Linux, what are the commands, what are the basic terminologies of Linux. That is what we have to understand, right? Alongside with Linux, we also have to understand how this particular operating system started, what was the main cause of we are having this operating system, and again how can we use it properly. We would be talking about a little bit commands, right? Some commands of Linux and a little bit an introduction about the operating system. Okay, so starting with the very first topic, obviously there are a lot of versions of Linux in today's time, right? There are literally a lot of versions, and Linux was created in 1990s, right? There's a very short story about it, right? Earlier, when there was no language, no big better operating systems, there were only operating systems that were DOS, right? We all know about DOS, that is disk operating system, and obviously a very simple operating system where you only have a this particular CLI mode. There was no use of mouse, only keyboard, and everything has to be done on this CLI, right? Everything has to be done on a black screen where you have to type all the things and you have to then use your computer, right? So you can copy the files, paste the files, right? Move the files from one place to another and all the things. So obviously we need to understand all these things. And when at that time when somebody wanted to have a PC or buy a PC, he or she would also have to get a knowledge of all these things, right? That how to work on CLI mode, which was not easier for everyone to work upon, and hence computers were not that much popular. The personal computers were not that much popular in those days. I'm talking about 1970s PCs. Right. Then Mac operating system, like this Apple or Steve Jobs, when they came up with the Apple company, right, they also started with selling the Mac operating system. And Mac operating system was similarly built upon and was not having any kind of legit, UI where you could basically use a mouse or something. Mouse was not discovered or not invented at that time. So then, what happened? People started. Some of the people were there who wanted to create a new language, right? Because these kind of operating systems were written in a language called as assembly, and assembly language is not a very typical or very easy to understand language. It's a very much complicated language, right? Because it deals with structures inside of your hardware, right? How a hardware could basically interact with a different hardware, right? How your RAM would be interacting with the CPU, how CPU would be interacting with uh, any other hardware related piece, right? So everything has to be written over here, and every particular thing has to be mentioned, and you have to create the commands for print, you have to create the commands for outputting and everything. It was very difficult to write a whole operating system within through assembly code. People created games with assembly, people created many different softwares with assembly, but those softwares, those games were not having compatibility or not having those like good graphics or good anything, right? Because you cannot directly create something very much greater with this particular thing. So that was the reason when some of the people were there, and assembly language was very prominent, and they thought that let's create a new language, right? So we could basically call it B, right? So that person thought that let me create B language over here, because assembly's acronym is A, and then we can basically go with the next language, which is called as B, the successor of this. So then B language was created, and this B language was created by this particular person, Ken Thompson. So Ken Thompson basically created this B language over here. You can see the images, right? So this particular person, Ken Thompson, he created B language, but B language was again not a very good success, right? Because it was still having some of the issues, and it was still not working well. People were still not adapting to B language. People were still like that, what I'll do with B, and how we will basically work ahead or go ahead with this B language. So that is something which people didn't want to understand about, right? So people were like, this B language is not that much great. So what we can do is we can basically work upon, and we can basically try to indulge or create a new language, a successor to B language, that could be C, right? So obviously B language was something which was great, right? But it didn't work out, and it still had to get some assembly commands. You still have to learn some assembly. So then this particular person who is like behind Ken Thompson came to Ken Thompson and asked, let's create a new language with your language. I like your idea. And then he basically modded B language and created C language. So all they did basically was, manipulating the data, right? They basically manipulated the language. For example, if there was a print function, they basically compiled that print function into one function, so that we all know that, okay, this is basically the print function over here, and we know that, okay, how print basically works, right? So if a new person is coming, he do not have to write the whole assembly code for print. He can just write printf, or see out in C++, right? So everything would be just executed at once. So obviously these were the kind of things that happened. And obviously Ken Thompson then got his relationship started with Dennis Ritchie, the creator of C language. They both then started and created a new operating system, because the main point was, Ken Thompson, and main point was just collaborating, was the main point was basically to create a new operating system. Creating a new language for developers was not the chance, not the main purpose. The main purpose was creating a new operating system, so that it could be easier for the people to adapt into a new kind of environment. So basically they created a very new operating system, and they had a patent on it, right? Obviously it was called as Unix operating system, and that was the time when Unix came into existence. Now that was a very, very, very big operating system. Many companies adapted it, and they started creating UI for that, and they started creating the UI you see in today's time. This particular desktop that you can see, right, the desktop environment, the recycle bin, my PC, and these icons on the desktop, all these things, right, were created in Unix, right? And then we all know the menu of like files, edit, options, all the menus that you can see in the status bar of all the programs over here, like file, edit, view, history, bookmarks. All these things were also created in Unix, right? And then basically a company called as Xerox created a mouse for all the UI things, and then obviously Apple copied it. Even today, if you buy a Mac operating system, Apple still works on Unix, right? So Apple has always been based on Unix operating system, and it's still Unix, right? So you can see Unix over there. But the real Unix, 1970s, it started in 70s and ended in 90s. Why? Because these two people got older and older, and they didn't update it well, right? Because these two people were coders, and when you become businessmen, obviously you cannot go further along a lot, right? So basically when they got older, there was nobody who could hold up to Unix. There were some community people, but obviously updating it to a very broad level was never a good option. And there was one person, right, in 1990s, when he grew up, he wanted to have some features and add it up in Unix, right? But Unix was not giving the features to him, right? So he thought that, let me create a new operating system, right? If nobody is basically giving me the updates, and if nobody is basically giving me the things that I want, how about if I could create my own operating system? So this person, Linus Torvalds, he started creating his own operating system, right? And obviously, he was like a very introvert kind of person. So he basically was the person who gave time to coding and everything. So this person started creating the operating system, highly inspired from Linux and Unix, and created a new operating system with new shell and everything new, right? Again, the operating system was created on C language, right? So he created this particular operating system called as Linux. He named it Linux because as his name is also Linus, right? And it's the operating system was inspired from Unix, so he basically kept the X. So that is why it's called as Linux. And the Linux was basically the operating system that was created in 1990s. But as soon as Linux started growing, right, because Linux was very much popular and started growing very rapidly, right, but he wasn't having a platform through which he could share the operating system with one another. He didn't basically created a company out of Linux, right? He only created Linux while coding for himself. So he didn't basically open a company. He just created a platform through which he could share this Linux to different other people, right? And that platform is in today's time world's largest, biggest platform of open source community. It is called as GitHub. So he basically created GitHub, and he also like created GitHub, and then on GitHub he uploaded his own version of Linux. And as you can just think about, right, Linux grew at such a very very rapid pace that if I basically show you Linux distributions list, right, in 1990s when Linux was once launched for the very first time, by 1992 a new version of Linux was created by a different community of people, and then in 1996 a new version, and then a new version, and it started happening, right? So basically you can see this is the time chart, or this is the map of Linux over here. You can see that first Linux was created in 1992, and then in 1993 Slackware was basically created, out of which many kind of other branches came into existence, right? And all these branches are basically the branches that showed that many of the people were interested in modding the Linux and giving it their own way, so that it could basically become a new operating system. And when larger group of community joined hand, they basically formed a company, or they basically formed a small organization to run that particular Linux server, and obviously to run it even till today's time. Many of the Slackware Linuxes are basically available in 2023 as well, right? Then one of the best version of Linux, SUSE, was basically created, right? And then again one of the best commercial version of Linux was created, which was basically called as Debian. Now Debian was very huge success, right? Because on Debian there were a lot of Linux that were created. Even our Kali Linux that was created in 2011 is also based on this particular thing only, right? Our Kali Linux, Parrot Linux, all the Linuxes like Ubuntu and everything comes from the same kind of Linux, right? You can see that Parrot was created over here. We have 2016, right? Kali also basically came over here in 2011. You might find it somewhere over here. And then if I go ahead, a new version of Debian was launched, right? Which was called as Ubuntu, and Ubuntu also became like a center point or epicenter for many other versions of Linux that are still coming in today's time, right? So these are the basic things. And then new Linux came into existence. For example, this is Linux Mint for all the people who haven't used Linux for the first time. Or then this Lindos, which was basically kind of Windows over here, so that if a person is coming directly from Windows, he could basically understand how Linux basically works, right? So over here then we basically started with Red Hat, right? Again, if you are in a college, right, you might have heard about Red Hat. The most famous version of Red Hat is CentOS, right? You might have heard about CentOS, and many of the colleges also teach CentOS to their students, right, over here. Then a new prominent version of Linux, SUSE Linux, continued, and again SUSE Linux has its own kind of what we can say branches, and obviously then come Enoch and Arch Linux, which is one of the prominent Linux. And every Linux is created in such a way that if you are basically into that particular thing, then only you will be able to install it. For example, if you are Arch Linux user, we can understand that you are a developer. Then if you are basically a Linux developer who develops or works into Linux and mods Linux, who works into development of the kernel in the Linux, then only you will be able to install Arch Linux. Otherwise, installing Arch Linux, if you are a cybersecurity enthusiast, would be very tough for you, right? And if you are a basic web developer, installing Arch Linux would be very tough for you, right? If you are a hacker, you could basically install Kali Linux, because it would be pretty much easy for you, because you have some of the hacking knowledge, right? So but installing Ubuntu is as easy as it could also be done by a 7 year or 8 years old kid, right? Because Ubuntu is based upon a very small functionality, and obviously it is built in such a way that even the children, or basically anyone who is coming for the first time to a computer, could also use that particular Linux, right? So the installation part has also been set up in a very easy manner. So then other Linuxes came into existence, and when in 2004 roundabout, it was 2004 when some of the people thought about putting Linux in a mobile device. They started with a project called as AOSP, right? And then this AOSP was bought by Google, and hence this is called as Android in today's time, right? So all your Android phones that are basically working on Android 12, 11, 13, 14, any version of Android, right? It's also Linux, right? So anything that you could basically do on your Linux environment, right, you can also do on your mobile phone. In case if you do not have a proper laptop to study or laptop to practice, you can turn up your mobile Android phone, install Kali Linux on your Android phone as well, and just simply start practicing in your phone, right? And it's really good. I have tried installing Kali in my tablet, and then using it in my tablet is fabulous, right? So basically many other mods of Android are also coming these times. Many of the skins are coming, so you can just check up which you want, and you can start learning, right? So that was basically the history of Linux, and obviously there are like a lot of versions that are there. For cybersecurity, there are some of the versions that were created. Kali Linux was created for cybersecurity. Parrot Linux was created for cybersecurity. Right. So Kali Linux is over there, and I would be going ahead with Kali Linux right now. And there is one more thing called as Parrot over here. So you can use any of the operating system, and Parrot and Kali both have their own advantages. Right. For example, Parrot has more tool than Kali, but Kali is frequently updated. So Kali stays very much strong and very much updated, with very much frequent supporters, and the community is very much large. You basically get solutions to a lot of things if you are stuck in a problem. But talking about Parrot, the forum, the people, the community is not that much huge, right? So obviously, getting the updates in Parrot would be like time to time it would be a hassle for you. Sometimes Parrot doesn't support well in virtual machines, and sometimes installation problems occur and you cannot find the solutions. So yeah, Parrot is buggy, right? But Kali is very much secure. The only point of using Parrot is that if you are highly interested, or if Parrot is your favorite, right? Parrot is my personal favorite, and I use it whenever I'm free. But whenever I want to teach students, or whenever I'm taking a session, or whenever I'm doing some professional work, I tend to use Kali only, right? Because Kali is much more prominent in that form, right? So over here, Parrot is really good, right? Let me open the website of Parrot as well, and Kali as well. We can compare the website side by side over here. You can see we have Kali Linux over here, kali.org, and parrotsec.org. So both the operating systems have like a very similar homepage over here, just like this. And the only point of using Parrot is that Parrot basically Parrot basically is a kind of operating system that could be used by small, or could be used by the person who is not having a good PC. Right? For example, in case if you are having 2 GB RAM, or only 4 GB of DDR3 or DDR4 RAM, you still want to learn hacking, then Parrot is for you. right? But if you have high amount of RAM, mostly in today's time, a lot of people have at least 8 GB of DDR4 RAM available. But in case if your PC is still old and you still want to basically learn Linux, right, and your PC cannot support Kali, obviously your PC would support Parrot and you can learn Parrot directly. Right. So Parrot is like very lightweight and Kali is not that much lightweight. So obviously that is the main reason, right, of people using Parrot, right? So if you click on download over here, right, and again in Parrot I can click on download, right? Both the operating system have a lot of download options that we can select from. If I talk about Parrot, there is a security edition built in, so it's 418 GB. I can directly download it, and it's a security edition, so obviously a lot of security tools would be there, right? So I can download it over here. In case you do not want to download edition which is a like security edition, you can then download the home edition, and the home edition is basically 2.3 GB, which does not include security tools, which only includes commercial tools like Office and VLC media players, mails, browsers, all these things. But it does not support, does not have hacking tools installed, right? Then there is a Parrot Linux for Hack the Box, right, which is a HTB edition where um, it would be automatically connected to hack the box and try hacking machines, so that you just have to open your Linux and start practicing for hacking. It's a very good initiative taken by Parrot over here, right? And then Cloud Edition, if in case you do not want to install it on your PC, or your PC does not have a good RAM, or you do not want to just frustrate your PC or frustrate yourself for installing all the things, you can directly install it with Docker, and or you can basically go ahead with any kind of Architect Edition, so that you could install it in a cloud and then you could access it from anywhere, right? Then there's this Architect version over here, Architect Edition, which is basically the edition that could be taken by many of the people who know how to do kernel install and kernel development, right? Because then only you will be able to understand how to install the Architect version of Linux. Basically, Architect versions are available only to the people, right, who want to manipulate or who want to mod the Linux and create a new operating system out of it. So that is how you can do it. Then we have a Raspberry Pi. This Raspberry Pi Parrot is basically available for Raspberry Pi editions, where you know that Raspberry Pi images are basically the images for Raspberry Pi. Now Raspberry Pi is basically a device which is a very 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 good device over here. It's around about 3 to 5 thousand rupees, and it have like a lot of ports, right? Like it basically have lot of open ports over here. For example, if I click on it, right, you can see that it's kind of PCB, right? And this is one of my favorite kind of thing. I have Raspberry Pi 3 right now at my home, and over here you can see it have like a connector for the display, it have a RAM, it have a CPU, it have like 3.5 jack port, and then it will basically have this card reader and USB ports, right? And it have like a type C port as well. Then we got an HDMI port over here to connect it with the display again, right? So we have like a lot of things over here, and you could basically see that this is a particular device which you can use for basically learning all the things. So you can just buy this device at 4,000 rupees. Many of the times it comes inbuilt with a screen, or in case if you have a screen at your home like a TV or something, you can connect this with that, and then obviously you're good to go. Your screen will become the computer. You can connect a hub, and you can connect basically keyboard and mouse, and you can install the operating system over here. So very lightweight machines are basically given for Parrot, for Raspberry Pi, so that you can install this operating system on that device, right? So that is the thing. So Parrot is good, and let's talk about Kali. For Kali, there are 8 editions that are basically given. Number 1 is ARM. Again, ARM is basically for Raspberry Pi and all these devices that I just told you about, right? So after ARM, we have installer images. Now these are the images basically that are used for directly installing into the PC, right? For example, in case if you want to dual boot, or in case if you want to remove your Windows and only install Kali, this is basically your go-to option. You have to use this installer image. 64-bit is available, 32-bit is available, and in case if you want to basically run your operating system, run your Kali in your Mac devices, for that we have all these images over here, right? Then we have like virtual machines, in case if you have a virtual machine software. Now for those who do not know what a virtual machine software is, virtual machine softwares like VMware, VirtualBox or QEMU are basically the operating system, basically the softwares that let that basically lets you run different kind of operating systems within an operating system. For example, if I am running Windows over here, and if I want to run any other operating system, I can directly open my virtual machine and I can run any operating system over here on my Windows 10. Right. So these are like a very good alternative when you want to practice. So obviously VMware works fine, virtual boxes also work fine, right? So you can go ahead with that. Weekly means that this particular thing would be having weekly updates. So I won't recommend you going with the weekly, because then weekly updates would be there in your Kali Linux, and the weekly images will take you right around about 2 to 3 GB of every week. So that would consume your internet, consume your data storage as well. So I would basically suggest you go with the stable image of VMware, in case you want to basically download it for VMware, download the Kali for VirtualBox, or you want to download the Kali for QEMU. You can just select a version and directly download it. Right, pretty simple. So then the next thing we have is a mobile option. So for the mobile option, as I told you, your Android phone can become Kali Linux directly, right? And it would be just like in different application you might be running in your phone, right? So basically, how to do that, the whole documentation has been given over here. So you can basically use your use your phone as your Kali Linux, right? And then we have like cloud options, and with this cloud options I can click on Linode, Azure, DigitalOcean, AWS, or generic cloud or anything, and I can directly install it in that particular place. For example, if I click on DigitalOcean right now, it will directly take me to DigitalOcean's website. Over here you can see that it would basically give me the option that how I have to install it in my DigitalOcean server, and I could be basically able to directly install this in my DigitalOcean server, and obviously I'll be able to run my Kali from anywhere, right? So this is also one of the things that I like most, because I do have a DigitalOcean server and I do like to basically go over there and install Kali, so that it would be pretty easy for me, right? I can if you the best part is that if you basically install your operating system in any of the server, in any of the cloud, you can access it from anywhere, right? Literally anywhere. You can access it from your phone through SSH. You can access it from your laptop. You can access it from your Mac. You can access it from any other Linux. You can access it from literally from anywhere in the world. So that's pretty good, right? And then we have like containers over here, right? Containers are like Docker and all these things. So containers are basically just like VMware, just like virtual machines. These are also kind of small virtual machines, not a big virtual machine, but small virtual machines over here, which could basically give you a virtualized environment. And then we have like live boot, which is basically used for installing the whole Kali Linux in your pen drive. And I would recommend you having at least 16 GB of pen drive, right? So you can install directly on your pen drive and you can take it anywhere. So whenever you basically go, or like go for a trip or something, you can just carry your pen drive and just just put in your pen drive and you have your Kali Linux ready, right? So that is the thing. And then we have WSL, the last version, and WSL is basically Windows subsystem for Linux. And this Windows subsystem for Linux is basically the main part where you can see that it could directly run on your Windows as well, right? Even with the Windows 11 update, this has become more frequent and more good, right? So what you have to do, all you have to do is basically go over to programs and features, right? So there is the settings in our control panel, which is basically programs and features, right? Let me just simply open control panel and you can see. So if I open control panel, this is basically a setting over here, which is programs and feature. If I click on it, you can basically see a lot of things over here. But the point is, you have to click on this turn Windows features on or off, and you'll see a list of features. So if I go down, you have to basically select Windows subsystem for Linux WSL, and once you select it and click on OK, it would basically run WSL. And once it runs WSL on your system, you can go to your store, your Microsoft store, and obviously you can search for Kali, or you can search for any other operating system to download, right? For example, I can search for Kali Linux over here, right? And it's Kali right? And it would basically give you this particular version of Kali over here. So let's wait, and you can see that Kali Linux would be listed over here. Parrot is also listed in this platform with WSL, and Ubuntu is also there, so you can directly download it and you can directly use it on your CMD and use it on your Windows, right? So pretty good thing, but it's good for practicing. But in case if you say that if I want to practice with a lot of virtual machines, right? How do I basically, is it a good option? Then I would say that no, this is not a good option, because the IP address configured to WSLs are not in your network. So you have to figure out manually how to set up the IP addresses so you can connect with different other machines, right? So for practicing, for only practicing how to use Linux, you can use WSL, right? But in case you want to work on virtualized machines, right, then you have to basically I could suggest that you should basically go it with VMware or VirtualBox, right? So this is the basic thing, and you can just simply click on get to simply download it, right? Also, I'll be using VMware for now for showing you the Linux and how to install and everything, right? So basically, this is the main VMware over here. In case you want to download VMware, we already have the links given in our Discord channel. So if I open the Discord channel for HackersVilla over here, you could basically see that if I open the Discord channel for HackersVilla over here, and if you could basically go over to this resources, right, you could basically see list of everything that would be needed for all the things, right? So this is basically the resources, and if I go above, right, there would be the list over here. So you can see that we have the list for VMware Workstation Pro 17, which you can basically download. We also have the links for like different other things. For example, we have the links for Bob Suite Professional Edition, Multigo Pro, and different other security pro tools that are licensed, and obviously we have given the license keys as well, so that you can use them whenever you want to, right? So these are the basic things, and right, in case you want to download, so these are the basic go-to material. You can come over to our Discord channel and directly get the things. Anybody over here, if you do not have any if you do not have a Discord channel link, it's basically pinned in the description of WhatsApp group. You can go head over to the WhatsApp group description, and you will be able to find find the thing, right? Find the link to our Discord channel, right? So to install Kali Linux in your VMware, what you have to do is that you have to go into this pre-built VMs thing, and you have to click on this VMware 64. And once you click on the download button, it will basically start downloading. So the downloading would be like 2.7 GB, not that much. So download will take place over here. It would take the time according to your speed that you might be getting, according to your internet connection. Once this is done, right, what you have to do, that it will give you a 7z file, which is a compressed file. So you have to first of all extract the data out of it. So once you extract the data, right, for example, if I go into ISO, you can see this is the 7z file that you will be getting, just like this. And you can open this with ISO reader or WinRAR or any kind of this kind of software, right? And you can just click over here, and you can like just simply extract it to a particular location. So I extracted it out over here. In here you can see it's basically here, and this is the whole operating system machine over here. And then what you have to do is you have to go over to your this particular machine. You have to basically go over to your VMware, and once you go into your VMware, you will be basically seeing these three options. You have to click on open a virtual machine, and once you click on over here, you have to basically go back to the location where you installed or where you downloaded the same thing. So over here you downloaded the thing. Let's say if I downloaded it in VM and I extracted over here in this folder, so I'll go inside this folder, and there will be one file that would be only 5 KB long, right? 5 KB in size would be shown over here. It would be a VMX file. So you just have to click on it, and once you click on this VMX file, it will basically give you an environment something like this. The ID and password for Kali would be written over here, right? You can see the ID and password is Kali, and the memory that you want to give, you can set up the size for how much RAM you want to give to your operating system, how many processors you want to give to your operating system. So I have currently 8 processors, out of which I have given it 4. I have 16 GB of RAM, so out of which I have given it 4 GB. I have 1 TB of SSD storage, so I've given it 80 GB of SSD storage over here. Right, again I have two monitor setup, so again I have given it both the monitors over here so that it could take the access. So basically you can also just do all these things. You have to go into the network settings, and in network settings you have to set the network settings to bridged, and make sure that you have this particular thing checked, otherwise the internet won't be working properly, right? So this is how you have to basically work on the things, and then you could basically see that description is giving for all how this Linux have to work and all the things. So this is the basic thing. In case you do not know how much RAM do your computer have and how many processors your computer is having, you can just visit the task manager, and in the performance tab you can see how much RAM you have. So for me it shows 15.4 GB, out of which 7.3 is currently being used. So I can say that yeah, the computer RAM is around about 4 GB 16 GB as of now, right? And how many CPUs do you have? You can just click on the CPU and you can see the graphs over here, right? You can see a lot of graph. Even if you do not see the graph, you could also see something like logical processors. So I have like 8 logical processors over here. That means 8 processors I am currently having, out of which I have given 4 to the operating system. That means if in like a case that this operating system might be using the highest performance, it can only use 4 CPUs of mine. So 4 CPUs would always be reserved for my Windows operating system. So I can just power on the machine, and once I power on, there is no particular installation as such. You can see something like this, right? So Kali Linux over here, and it's like one of the latest version over here. As you can see, it looks like this. Earlier it used to come like in a blue edition, but now it has become black as I updated it just 2 or 3 days before it updated with all the versions and everything. So over here you can see it's loading. Let it basically load, and let it basically boot the Kali operating system, right? And the whole booting process will go just in front of you. You can see the whole animation has come over here. This is basically the Kali's animation, right? Again, I'm using this in my VMware environment, right, on my SSD. If you run it on your Kali, if you run the Kali machine on your hardware, like if you run it on your hard disk, it would take about a minute or two. It might take around about 130 to 140 seconds to boot up. For me it's that fast because I really have all the things set up, and I have high speed SSDs. That's why it only takes around about 13 to 15 seconds for me to boot up, right? So it depends time to time with you guys as well, right? And I have like a lot of operating system installed over here. So over here you can see this is how Kali would look like, right? And this is like the main machine over here, and over here you can see it's just like Windows, right? You can just maximize it, and obviously you are in Kali machine. Right now you can see that how successfully I have got inside Kali. In case I have to go out, I can just click over here and I can come back to my Windows anytime. And if I want to go back, I can just click over here, go back into my Kali Linux, right? So over here you can see there are folders, and there is like this my file system where everything is located. There is this trash, which is again the recycle bin, and then the status bar, which basically gave me number one, these power options, right? What to do with my session. Then the lock option, which could basically give me the lock screen, my battery, right? And then again it basically gives all the notifications, right? That in case if we get any notification from Kali, right, we get the volume tab, right? And we get the internet connection tab, then the time and calendar over here, right? And then here we have got some of the things. For example, if I click over here, it's just like the start menu. It gives you the list of all the all the softwares that are basically over there. So you can see a lot of information gathering sessions are information gathering things are basically given. All the information gathering tools, right? Then vulnerability analysis tools, web application analysis tools, right? Then we got database hacking tools over here, right? Password attacking tool, then Wi-Fi hacking tools, right? Reverse engineering tools. Then we have got exploitation tools, so for hacking into any kind of system, right? Sniffing and spoofing tools for doing man-in-the-middle attacks, ARP poisoning attacks, and cache poisoning attacks, right? Then we got post-exploitation, what to do after you have attacked the system, how to clear your records and all these things, right? Forensics, right? How to basically do autopsy and how to basically go inside files that might be vulnerable, or how to basically attach one thing to another thing, how to get data, internal data out of the devices or out of the softwares, right? So to do all the forensics, right? So this is forensic tool. Then reporting tool, once you have found the bugs, you want to report the things, here are the things that would help you create your report. Social engineering hacking tools, the tools that would that would basically that are basically required for hacking into social medias, right? And there are some of the links for Kali Linux and offensive security websites over here. So these are some of the links, and again we have all these things that are given. So obviously there are more than 500 tools in Kali, but Parrot have more than 1000 tools. So yeah, Parrot is much better in the form of tools, but Parrot is not that much frequently updated as if I basically talk about Kali. So our main goal of Kali would be to basically learn Kali in such a way that we should not use our mouse to do anything. For example, if I have to open the terminal, I have to just type Control Alt T, and in just a second my terminal will pop up over here, and all the things I have to do within this terminal, that is my end goal. I can just zoom in my terminal over here, right, with Control Shift plus over here, and then I can type the commands. For example, I can go into I can see how many folders are there in my current folder by typing ls. So it basically lists all the items and tells me that how many folders and files I am having in my current folder. Now I want to visit a particular folder. For example, I want to visit a hack folder that is inside my folder. I can just type cd command and just change my directory to the hack folder. I can do ls over here and see how many files are there, right? So it's just like that. If you basically go inside this, let's say if I want to do it GUI manner, so you can see this is my home folder which I just showed you, and there is the hack folder over here. I could just click on this hack folder and you can see all the 3 files, and all these 3 files are over here as well, as you can see, right? So pretty easy, right? Just like how you might have how you can do it all the things in a GUI manner, right? I can do all the things in this particular CLI mode only. So this CLI mode is much more powerful and much more faster than any other thing, right? So let me give you a kind of demo for the advantage, right? Why I'm saying it's much more faster, because let's say that in case if you want to let's say that in case if you basically want to do a lot of or create a lot of particular folders uh, in your thing over here. So let's say in case I want to create a new folder, I have to right click, I have to click on create folder, give the name of the folder and click on create, and that is how I'll be able to create a new folder, right? But over here in Kali, if I in the CLI mode, if I want to create a new folder, I just have to write the command mkdir on make directory, and then I can basically write the name, for example Sanchay, and over here the folder is created. I can do all these things like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, like 1 2 3 4 5 6, and you can see how many folders I have created just in a second, right? I want to delete all the folders, 1 2 3 4 5, deleted. I want to delete all the files, rm rf star, and all the files are deleted. I want to create a new file, touch hello, I have created a new file. I want to edit a file, nano hello, and over here I have the editor, and now I can basically type the content hello world, right? And now I can save it, come back, and again I want to see what's in the file, cat hello, I can see what's in the file. So all the things that you want to do over here, you want to rename the file, you can rename the file with this particular command hello. I want to rename with my name, so I basically do this and the file has been renamed, right? I want to copy the file in the same directory with some another name, so copy Sanchay, and now I want to basically store it with some other name, for example sing.cpp. So now you can see the file has been saved. I want to remove both the files, so this is how I can do this, right? So pretty easy, right? You can see now. I know that just learning all these commands would be would be very much overwhelming at the very first time, right? We would be having a proper session on Linux scripting and commands, right, so that you can learn all the things. But the point is, this is how you could basically this is just a demo of how fast Linux could be if you are basically running everything just within the reach of your fingers and just typing all the things and doing all the things. And it's pretty much easier, not that much tough. right? Because our terminal is basically a shell, right? And for that we really need to understand what a shell is, right? A shell, that if I talk about Windows, right, Windows is having a lot of layers. For example, there is the hardware, and then there is basically different drivers for different things. So there is a keyboard driver, there is a graphic driver, there is mouse driver, pen drive driver, then there are USB drivers, there are like drivers for your Ethernet cable, drivers for internet, drivers for Wi-Fi, drivers for this, that, everything has a driver over here, and all these drivers are managed by one particular engine, right? And then this engine basically creates graphics and creates like one more OpenGL over here is basically used that interacts with this particular engine, and over here we have Windows. So this is how Windows is basically working. It's basically stacked, and that's why Windows is not that much flexible, right? And it does not basically let you manipulate a lot of things. But if I talk about my Kali, or if I talk about Linux, right, Linuxes are built in pretty much good manner. Here is the hardware. Above hardware, you do not have different drivers. You only have one thing called as a kernel. Now this particular kernel has a lot of things over there, right? It handles all the hardware, and above hardware is your Linux machine. So how simple it is to basically work upon Linux, right? Because it's pretty simple. You have Linux machine over here, you have a kernel, and you have a hardware. Unlike your Windows operating system, which used to have a lot of layers and different drivers, which could uh, get messed up anytime, but over here Linux cannot mess it up. The only point is that how I'll be basically giving the commands from my Linux to kernel, because obviously kernel translates the command into ones and zeros for the hardware, right? But the point is, how will I give the command to the Linux kernel, right? So to give the command to Linux kernel, there is something called as shell, which is used basically. So this shell is basically the thing that lets you give the command to the Linux kernel, so that you can basically handle or operate on the hardware directly, right? When Unix was in development, when Unix was created, so a lot of shells were created. One of the prominent shell of Unix was Bourne shell, created by a person called as Bourne. So Bourne shell was the basic person who created this thing. There were other shells created. For example, there was a C shell, there was a corn shell. So Unix had like a lot of variations in the shell. Various people created their own kind of shell which supported different kind of command types. For example, our Bourne shell has the command ls for listing up all the items, but corn shell might have different other kind of, for example, called corn shell could have the command as list. Now C shell could have the command as lst. So all the shell have different kind of commands, right? So that is the thing. Bourne shell was very much popular, and when Linux was created, this Bourne shell was taken, right? So when Linux was created, right, a new version of Bourne shell was created, which was called as Bourne again shell, right? So Bourne again shell is the basic name, and if I basically try to write the short form, it's BASH, right? So you might have heard about this word before, bash. So this is the bash over here, and bash usually basically means that means the name of the shell that we are using, and everything that we are typing in over here, right? Everything that we are typing in over here, for example, ls, cd, right? Or typing anything, going into any folder, doing any command, right? So all these things that we are typing over here, we are typing in bash only. We are typing in a shell only, right? We are giving direct input to the kernel, so that kernel is giving the direct input into the hardware, and we are getting all the things. That is why Linux is much more prominent, much more faster, much more easier to use in today's time. And obviously there are a lot of servers that uses Linux in today's time to work upon, right? So this is something you need to learn a lot, right? And the point is that again, if you run it in virtual machine, you can see the performance, real-time performance in my system over here. You can see round about 7.4 GB is used overall in my machine. Right now, currently I'm streaming this. I am basically showing this onto your Google Chrome there, right in the Meet. I am also basically I have also basically opened the recorder over here, which is basically recording the things, right? And then again, I have opened a high-level operating system over here, and all the things are basically using 7.4 GB of RAM only. So if you have maximum 8 GB of RAM, all the things would work fine, because obviously you do not have to stream it anywhere, so obviously you will be using only 6 GB of RAM, right? And then over here you can see the processor, it's only 84% used right now. All the processors are in use right now because our Kali is also taking the processors and all the things are working. Only thing is that my Kali Linux also supports having a GPU over here, so 200 MBs of GPU is also used right now. So in case if you have a GPU, dedicated GPU in your laptop or computer or desktop, it might help you a little bit to tweak the performance over here, right? So you can see how much RAM over here we have basically taken. So the maximum RAM currently is taken by the Google Chrome, right? And all these things are basically shown over here. So that is the thing. And our recorder is basically taking 30% of CPU right now, so that is the basic thing, right? Our VMware workstation is not taking a lot of RAM right now, right? But still we are running this operating system over here, and you can see we are fine, right? That's the beauty of running it in a virtualized environment, right? Also, what I can do is that I could basically take in some other forms as well, right? You could basically see that if I could run different other operating systems, I could run maximum 4 to 5 more operating systems simultaneously, then only my 16 GB RAM would get filled, right? So now you can see that in case if you have 8 GB of RAM, you're good to go with this Kali Linux machine in your virtualized environment, right? The prime reason behind the variation in command in Arc and Debian is shell. Yes, obviously the shell is different in Debian and the shell is different in Arc Linux. That's why the commands are very much different in both the Linuxes, right? So that is the basic thing. Again, one of the thing that Arc Linux is created in a way that you can mod it and you can basically tweak the kernel, but in Debian you cannot do that, right? That's why Linux Torvalds is also he also does not like Debians are basically created to directly go into the workflow, but in case you want to do the shell development or you want to work on the kernel development, you should go into SUSE Linux or Slackware, or I could say Arch Linux is the best for that. In case you want to use a hacking machine, that comes in the command line or that comes in the line of Arc. With you could use Black Arc is basically the Arc version, which is basically created for ethical hacking and cybersecurity. So that is what you can do, right? So I guess you might have understood about how Linuxes were created and how in today's time Linuxes are working, right? So any doubts if you guys are having, please let me know in the chats, and we can end up with today's session. So I'll be waiting for a minute over here. In case if you have any doubt, we can just wait, or otherwise we can just end up the session, and we'll be meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. with a new topic. Tomorrow we would be going into a little bit scripting part of Linux, right? We would be talking about some of the commands and some of the scripting part of Linux, and we would be talking about how we can script in Linux so that it would be easier for us to perform certain tasks and to automate certain tasks, right? That is what we will be doing tomorrow at 6 p.m. And yeah, that would be day 4. So please don't forget to join all the regular attendees over here who are coming every day. You are requested to come at least every day to learn all the things, right? Once I heard that your PC can work as Arduino, is it right? Yes, your PC can work as Arduino. It is right. You have heard right. We can do that, right?